explains the rules for any contest to replace him.
For a leadership election to be triggered, 81 Labour MPs would have to back a single candidate. There's currently no agreement about a successor among those who've called for the Prime Minister to go. If a challenger did reach that number, Sir Keir Starmer would automatically be entitled to a place on the ballot. If he chose to resign, any contenders would also need the support of either 5% of grassroots Labour parties or 3 affiliated organisations, 2 of which would have to be trade unions. Party members would then get to vote, and Labour's ruling National Executive Committee would determine how long the contest lasts. As it stands, Andy Burnham wouldn't be eligible to run because he's not currently an MP. His supporters want to wait to give him time to attempt to win a seat in Parliament, among them the Labour MP Clive Lewis.
The vision and the scale of the pace that's required of change just isn't there. And I think one of the things we can see with Andy Burnham is in Manchester, he's articulated and began to show pragmatically what that could look like. And I think that's exciting. It's about rewiring the British state. It's about making sure that we have a country where people actually have a stake in that country.
A contest without Burnham could mean that so-called soft left MPs need to find an alternative candidate. Allies of the former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner have said she is prepared to run if required. A quicker challenge to Sir Keir is seen as more beneficial to the Health Secretary Wes Streeting. His allies, broadly on the right of the party, have been urging him to take the leap and make a bid for the top job. But the party rules mean that right now, Sir Keir Starmer's supporters still insist he's going nowhere.
Our senior UK correspondent, Seema Katecha, has been looking at what the resignation of Jess Phillips might mean for the government's pledge to halve violence against women and girls in a decade.
Jess Phillips was passionate about reducing violence against women and girls prior to even being appointed Minister for Safeguarding after the 2024 general election. She conveyed in her resignation letter her frustration with how slow she perceives change to be. Insiders in the Home Office tell me they too share some of that frustration, with one person describing policy implementation around violence against women and girls as slow-paced and sluggish. The government had promised in its manifesto that it would halve the rate of this type of violence over the next decade. My understanding is that objective has felt to some working alongside Ms Phillips as unachievable, with one staffer telling me the issue hasn't felt like a priority, like something high on the government's agenda. They said for Jess, dealing with this is at the centre of her being. The founder of the domestic violence charity Resolute told the BBC that Ms Phillips standing down because she feels the Prime Minister is not up to the job reduces trust in the government among those who've experienced horrific abuse and leaves survivors asking who is looking out for them.
The leadership turmoil has rattled the markets, pushing up the cost of government borrowing and weakening the pound. At one point, the effective interest rate on a 10-year loan to the Treasury reached its highest level since the 2008 financial crisis. Markets calmed when it appeared less likely there would be an immediate leadership challenge, but they remain jittery, as our economics editor Faisal Islam explains.
Markets continue to push up borrowing costs for the government amid the Prime Minister's difficulties, while interest costs around the world have been rising on the back of the Iran war. The UK has been hit somewhat harder in global markets in the last few days. In the UK, the effective interest rate on 10-year debt rose above 5%, reaching an 18-year high of 5.13% this morning before falling back. There were rises elsewhere in Europe, but not by as much. The extra premium for the UK can be put down to both the sheer uncertainty about leadership, but also a presumption that any leadership contest would eventually lead to higher spending and borrowing. Some think tanks loosely aligned with potential leadership candidates have floated changing the Chancellor's limits on borrowing, albeit over a series of years. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, recently suggested exempting defence spending from limits on borrowing. The uncertainty is unlikely to lift quickly, which risks leaving long-term interest rates stuck above 5%.
After 2 tumultuous days in Westminster, our political editor Chris Mason looks at where the unfolding drama leaves Sir Keir Starmer.
The Prime Minister tonight teeters on the niceties of process. His authority continues to drain, his government, his party openly combusting in front of us. But today's act of defiance, an expression of his long-standing view that his ousting would herald chaos, hinges on Labour's rulebook. none of his potential successors have yet declared, let alone come forward with the requisite 81 names of Labour MPs. And so while he looks increasingly done for in anything beyond the short term, at least for now he has a procedural barricade to cower behind. And tactically, he's saying to his potential challengers, put up or shut up. For Wes Streeting in particular then, whose nurturing of prime ministerial ambition isn't recently acquired, a crunch point to go for it or not. The potential prize, the premiership, the potential jeopardy, well, huge. And meanwhile, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, found himself in London today, seeking support and a seat, and sharpish. It is 7 years ago this month that Theresa May resigned as Prime Minister. Since then, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. Only Mr Sunak was ousted in a general election. Sir Keir hangs on for now.
We'll return to the crisis facing the Prime Minister later in the bulletin. The leader of Plaid Cymru, Rhun ap Iorwerth, has been voted in as the next First Minister of Wales. It's the first time the post hasn't been held by a Labour politician. He succeeds Baroness Eluned Morgan, who lost her seat in the Senedd elections last week and subsequently resigned as the Welsh Labour leader. Our Wales correspondent Hull Griffith has been following the proceedings in Cardiff.
In a newly refurbished Senedd, the newly installed First Minister of Wales took the applause of his fellow Plaid Cymru members, having become the party's first ever politician to lead Wales. Rhun ap Iorwerth said something had stirred in the nation during last week's election. It certainly brought a swirl of change, with Plaid becoming the largest party and Reform UK forming the main opposition. Labour's 9 members been consigned to the backbenches. As he'll lead a minority government, Rhun ap Iorwerth knows he will need the support of others to win Senedd votes over the next 4 years, and so promised to seek cooperation and collaboration where possible.
I'll never take this privilege for granted, nor will my principles be burdened by power. Because the challenges we face are too many in number and too grave in nature for us to lose sight of what is at stake.
The First Minister has also pledged to reset the relationship with the UK government within his first 100 days in office. However, the current tumult in Westminster may mean he will struggle to gain Downing Street's attention.
You're listening to the 6 o'clock news on BBC Radio 4. The main news so far. 4 ministers quit, 87 Labour MPs call on him to go, but the Prime Minister insists he's staying. Still to come.
I want you to know how sad I am, but them's the breaks.
I am determined to deliver. I cannot deliver the mandate. I am a fighter and not a quitter. I am resigning.
I have given this job my all.
Addicted to the drama, why does politics seem to be stuck on double speed? Inflation in the United States has risen again to a 3-year high. It now stands at 3.8%, up half of 1% from the figure in March. High energy costs linked to the war with Iran accounted for more than 40% of the overall increase. Our North America business correspondent Zamira Hussain reports from New York.
The war with Iran is hitting the world's largest economy, pushing up the cost of living for Americans. The latest inflation figures came in higher than many economists were expecting, driven in large part by skyrocketing energy costs. It is not just gasoline and fuel that have gone up. Food and housing, airfares, and clothing have all increased too. Last week, the latest jobs report showed the U.S. economy continues to add jobs, but wages are not increasing nearly enough to keep up with inflation, says Tomas Philipson from the University of Chicago.
People are definitely feeling strapped. The real wage growth has not been as large as it was before the war in Iran started, essentially. And that's certainly weighing on the White House.
President Trump maintains the high price of oil is temporary and will drop when the conflict is over. But a resolution to the war remains elusive as both sides reject each other's peace proposals.
Iran's neighbours are continuing attempts to help Tehran and the US reach a peace deal. Turkey's foreign minister is due to hold further talks in Qatar. Iran says it's keeping its finger on the trigger, but is focused on a sustainable peace. Yesterday, President Trump described the current ceasefire as being on life support. He's now heading to China for a state visit where he's expected to urge his counterpart Xi Jinping to help end the war. Mr. Trump has described the Chinese leader as an amazing, amazing man. Our China correspondent Laura Bicker reports from Beijing.
China will feel it has the upper hand in these talks as Xi Jinping faces a war-weakened Donald Trump. Nudging Tehran towards the negotiating table may give President Xi leverage over his counterpart. In return, China is likely to pressure the US to stop supplying arms to Taiwan, the self-governing island Beijing claims as its own. Despite their differences, China is preparing a lavish welcome for the US president, and the two leaders are expected to tour the Temple of Heaven, a sacrificial altar dating back to the 15th century.
Lebanon's state media says at least 12 people have been killed in the latest Israeli airstrikes in the south of the country. Fighting between Israeli forces and the Lebanese Iran-backed group Hezbollah has continued despite a ceasefire between the two countries. The authorities say 2 of them were paramedics who were hit during a rescue mission. Our Middle East correspondent Hugo Beshega sent this report from Beirut.
The ambulance arrives at the hospital, the rescuers open the door, and despair. Inside, the body of a colleague, killed in what Lebanese officials say was another double-tap strike by Israel on first responders. 3 people were killed in the attack, the presumed target, and 2 paramedics who had come to their rescue. The Israeli military said it was looking into the case. In recent days, Israel has intensified its attacks on Lebanon's south. Communities are in ruins and have been largely abandoned as residents fear returning home. The health ministry here says at least 380 people have been killed since a ceasefire came into effect a month ago. A ceasefire that has failed to stop the war. Hezbollah says it has carried out new attacks against Israeli troops occupying parts of southern Lebanon. Israeli and Lebanese officials are expected to meet again in Washington on Thursday to try to find a way to end the conflict. In a letter released today, the Hezbollah leader, Naim Qassem, dismissed those efforts and said his group would keep on fighting.
Israel's parliament has approved a law which could see Palestinians accused of involvement in the Hamas-led attacks in 2023 face the death penalty. Human rights groups say the military tribunals would deny defendants the right to a fair trial. They also allege that some evidence has been obtained through torture, claims denied by the Israeli authorities. A BBC investigation has identified a people smuggler believed to be responsible for bringing thousands of migrants into the UK in small boats and lorries. Kado Jaff, a 28-year-old Iraqi Kurd, had kept his real name a closely guarded secret for years while evading law enforcement agencies. Sue Mitchell reports.
Rania, a town in Kurdish Iraq, is home to a network of smugglers, including Kado Rania, the false name of a man who avoids arrest
has been the target of an unprecedented attack. A cutting-edge thriller based on the latest research in AI safety.
This is a next-generation AI with the compute power of a small city.
You were right, it's spreading.
This is clearly the beginning of a wider campaign of destabilization by a foreign nation-state.
Wraith. I'm not joking. The whole city looks like it's on fire.
Oh my God.
Friday afternoons at 2:15 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
This is BBC Radio 4. Criminal gangs and extremists are seeking to manufacture their own weapons with 3D printed guns on the rise in the UK. There have been 80 cases involving such weapons in the last 3 years. For File on 4 Investigates, Adrian Goldberg explores how much of a threat these homemade guns are.
Jesus Christ.
West Midlands police search a bedroom in Birmingham. Hidden in the wardrobe, a cache of firearms.
I think we have one more. This one's the one of concern for me.
It's a worrying discovery, and there's one especially disturbing find.
That's definitely semi-automatic, and it's apparently a 3D printed gun.
Officers have identified a 3D printed firearm, the kind of gun criminals and extremists can make at home. These weapons have long been discussed as a potential threat for the future. Now they're turning up on the streets of Britain.
Squeaky bum time.
Because these guns can be manufactured privately without a serial number, there's no means of knowing where they were made or who made them.
The big appeal of these guns is that they allow you to literally make a firearm at home, and the designs are freely available online for anyone to download and then make and eventually use.
Luigi Mangione, accused of shooting dead a US healthcare executive in New York in 2024, is suspected of using a homemade gun with 3D printed parts. There are fears they could bring bloodshed to the streets of the UK too.
I hope it doesn't come to pass when we start seeing massacres with 3D guns.
But that is the concern, that is the fear.
That is.
I'm Adrian Goldberg, and on this week's File on 4 Investigates, we explore the looming menace of 3D printed guns. They've already proved attractive to criminal gangs and extremists in the UK, and we'll hear from experts who warn that the technology to make these homemade firearms is developing all the time. There's reaction from police officers on the front line of this dangerous new threat.
We will hunt down anyone who attempts to print a 3D firearm to keep the public safe, ultimately, because we see that threat as 3D printing becomes more accessible and easier to produce firearms.
It's in Bradford. The driver, Majid Rahman, parks outside the house of Christopher Gill, who has been under police surveillance. Gill walks out of the house, puts a supermarket shopping bag in the back of the car, then goes back inside. Rahman drives off, unaware that he's being watched by police officers. Detective Superintendent Al Burns of Yorkshire and Humber Regional Organised Crime Unit is supervising from the operations room.
That car departed the address and was en route. It's my professional assumption and judgment that there was a potential for a viable firearm in the back of that car.
Al Burns has a quick decision to make. He suspects Rahman is now armed, so he can't be allowed to drive far. But stopping him in the late afternoon traffic carries a risk, both to police officers and the public.
It was a tense situation, it always is, and the last thing we want to do is put the public at risk. So the decision was made to stop that car, what we'd call a relatively hard stop, so surrounding the car, forcing it to stop by armed police officers.
This busy dual carriageway on the edge of the city is where Majid Rahman's car is intercepted by armed officers. Rahman is wrestled to the ground and handcuffed. When police look inside the shopping bag in the footwell, they see what looks like a submachine gun. But this weapon, a mixture of 3D printed plastic parts and metal components, has been homemade. There's a loaded magazine and bullets too. How surprised were you to find a 3D printed firearm?
Surprised, yeah. Very, very rare occurrence in UK law enforcement. Very rare to see such weapons like that in the UK. To have it in your own doorstep, a real surprise and obviously concerning.
Christopher Gill's house in Bradford is searched. In the loft, police find another 2 3D printing instructions had been downloaded from the internet.
I'm not going to go into the details of the websites, but through the investigation, we're able to see that there was a file sharing application. Moyo himself had an MSc in computer science at the University of Bradford. He was a car enthusiast, so had some knowledge around manufacturing.
And in terms of seeking advice for how to manufacture, they were sourcing this then relatively freely on the internet.
You've got to have a knowledge where you're going to go look. Certainly if you start putting in terminology into search engines and stuff like that, there's lots of different sites.
Rahman, thought to be their courier, was jailed too, in a case described as the first of its kind in the UK. But it's one that also posed a troubling question for law enforcement. If this gang could produce their own weapons, why not others too?
So in terms of the printing, you can see that the filament that's being brought through from the spool printer is going to get heated slightly above its melting temperature.
Dr. Rachel Bolton-King is Associate Professor of Forensic Science at Nottingham Trent University.
and then it's going to then deposit the melted material in layers in order to build up each of the layers and construct whatever's being printed.
Rachel is an expert in firearms and ballistics, and in the lab she's shown me how a 3D printer works. They print off computerized designs, often using filaments of polymer, a tough plastic, which are melted under heat and layered piece by piece to create parts that you put together to make a gun, usually with the addition of metal components. Making a weapon like this is illegal in the UK, and it does represent...
Go ahead, not a problem.
In 150 yards, at the roundabout, take the fourth exit onto Marsh Way.
An online community from his home in Mississippi, where members compete to create new gun designs and share downloadable files online.
This was one of the very first ones that our organization created. This is a V3 version. This is a Harlot. It is a Derringer 22, and what that means is it is a single shot 22. This is completely 3D printed. Cost me a few bucks of filament, no firearm parts besides a
exit
barrel
the roundabout
liner,
onto Marsh
and
Way.
everything else can be sourced at your local hardware store.
In a quarter of a mile,
Gage
turn
argues
left
that
onto
having a
New
gun to
Road,
protect himself and his
A1306.
family is his right, which, where he lives in the southern United States, it is. But he isn't oblivious to the harms that can be caused by firearms, nor their attraction to criminal elements.
I mean, of course, criminals and extremist terrorists, they're going to use any